Trade deadline day, and I've already got my Brandon Carlo jersey on. The Leafscast is back.
Holy mackerel, what a shot! It's Auston Matthews! Do you believe that? Pounds it off the roof of the net!
Leafscast is back. Stephen Douglas joined by Tim and Ryan Allison to recap the trade deadline, where the Leafs have made two significant transactions, probably, 24 significant transactions across the entire NHL. And yes, I said it, but in the last 7 hours, I have secured the first Brendan Carlo Maple Leafs jersey. That's right.
Steven, the C on that jersey does not stand for Carlo. I'm sorry.
They started putting the numbers, the letters on the front, and I had to turn around the back. I will not show the back, but I promise this is a Brendan Carlo jersey. I am all in on the trades today.
Does that jersey come in like extra large size? That's the only way I'll believe it's a Brendan Carlo jersey.
Oh, yeah, well, yeah. Me and Brendan Carlo, not quite the same size, but we do have the same passion. So, obviously, the boys here, minus me, did a great job setting the stage for what the Leafs were looking for out of this trade deadline. Obviously, we needed help on the front end and on the back end. Brad decided to sleep in. He went to bed early last night, and then he decided to sleep in today till about, noon, maybe 11:30 or something like that, and made two significant trades today to bring in defenseman Brendan Carlo from the Boston Bruins and forward, Scott Laughton from the Philadelphia Flyers to address a top D man spot and a top 9 forward spot. The costs were not low, but the returns are high. What do you guys think about the day? Costs aside and everything, just what do you guys think about the Maple Leafs right now as cup contenders and just a better hockey team than they were before the day started?
Well, I think you've said it there as far as the Leafs are a better hockey team. Like both Scott Laughton and Brendan Carlo are upgrades to the current positions that they'll play. So Scott Laughton, definitely not known for his offense. I would say the biggest thing he has going for him, one, he has spent time at center this year, and two, he's a heart and soul guy. Also plays with an edge, which we know Berube and Treliving like, but hopefully he's, when we're languishing in the playoffs, he's the one that's going to give you a bit of a boost. So hopefully he might be more of a character guy, but then I'd say Brendan Carlo is the bigger upgrade from just a sheer size upgrade on the defenseman. We always joke about Brad sort by height and weight, and that's Brad's top target. And Brendan Carlo, 6'5" every night.
When's the last time we had a defenseman that big? I mean, Yanni Hakanpää for 2 games, but besides that, right. that guy's the size of 2 Leafscast members together. That's insane. Ryan, what do you think?
Oh, it was super fun. I mean, it was getting stressful by the end. We'll get into the trades themselves, but I was pretty happy when the Laughton trade went down. That was the guy I wanted them to get on our podcast we did there last week, Tim, and they got him, so I'm happy about that. But then as the day went on, I'm just thinking, Brad, you still have work to do. We need a defenseman here. And with 3 o'clock came around, I didn't think they were going to do it, and then I honestly didn't even think about any of these Boston guys because I thought there's no way. Yeah. There's no way that Boston is making a trade like that to the Leafs. And then as soon as they moved their captain to a divisional rival, it's just all gloves are off. And turns out we got Carlo there. So I'm quite happy with the returns overall. We'll obviously get into the high price tags that came with them and kind of minutiae of the deal. But I'm pretty happy with what Brad did here. Last year it was a kind of boring trade deadline. We didn't do anything like this. We traded 2 firsts and arguably our top prospect today. And we're a lot better because of it. So let's get into it.
Tim, I feel like you kind of manifested this Leafs-Boston trade. You've been harping for a week now about the last time the Leafs made a trade, with Boston.
It's true.
I wasn't alive or something like that.
Going back to Thomas Caberlet or Tuukka Rask or Phil Kessel, those are the notable, basically all the Leafs Boston trades. It doesn't happen a lot.
Yeah, it did feel
but then Boston just decided to blow it all up this year. They said that even though they're not that far out of a playoff spot, I mean, you mentioned it before, but basically every team that was selling players, the prices are significantly higher. They were just teams are just desperate. Like, I think for the Leafs, you see at what Florida was able to add last week and Seth Jones. Tampa moved earlier this week, adding extra depth. Both those teams in our division, I think, not even talking about Colorado, Dallas in the West. The rich get richer, I think, is the story about the trade deadline, right? With the top teams just going all in.
Unless if your name is Carolina Hurricanes.
No, they cemented themselves as mid. They'll forever be mid.
Yeah, seriously. Just so crazy. Like, and I remember, like, as Tim, you were like mentioning how rare it is for the Leafs to trade with Boston, and how like there was just so many names on that team that obviously like the Leafs and other teams were interested in. But I was just like so convinced there's no way we're making a trade for any of these guys. I thought the same thing about Pittsburgh, honestly, too. Even though they're not like an on the ice rival, just the fact that Dubas left, I was like, because they had some names and they were selling. I was like, there's no way we would get somebody from Pittsburgh, and we obviously make a deal with Pittsburgh too, shipping off Connor Dewar and
Timmins.
Timmins today to them. But anyway, back to the trade. So, I think. Let's start with Scott Laughton. I mean, it almost feels like you can always add another forward to like any team and just move guys down. But I'd say this is like the first time in a while that the Leafs had such a significant hole at 3C that needed to be addressed. I personally think they could not have done any better. I think value-wise, like just compared to some of the other deals that happened for a guy that can play center.
Well, let's break down the value of it just to say what the trade was. So we got Scott Laughton, who's 30 years old, and he's under contract for this year and next year at 50% salary retained. So we're paying him $1.5 million on the cap for the next 2 seasons. And we also got back a 4th and a 6th round pick, but it cost us our 1st round pick. We don't have our 1st round pick in this upcoming draft. We do have our 1st round pick in next year's draft, but it's not that pick we traded. It was the 1st round pick in 2027 draft, along with our favorite quote machine, Grabentkin, is also out the door. Grabentkin was a 5th round pick who played a couple games for us, and now he will no longer be doing so. So that's the trade.
That's the trade. And I guess, so some background on Scott Laughton is... I mentioned it earlier in the podcast, but I'm actually not as big a fan of this, and I wouldn't necessarily say it's the perfect ad. I think looking at maybe the perfect ad for like what the Leafs decided to afford, given that Brad put a sizable chunk of change as well as prospects into defense. But for forwards like Scott Laughton, he kind of seems to me like a Max Domi. Like, he's a guy who's kind of a winger, kind of a center. Obviously, like, he's a better center than Max Domi. Not a guy who's going to get you a lot of depth scoring, which is what's been kind of our Achilles heel in the playoffs. So I love that he's like an energy guy. I love that he's like a heart and soul player, and he's going to give us good character. But 1st round pick is a lot to give up. I don't know.
Well, this is a guy who, has never scored 40 points in the NHL. Right? And just when we think about like some of the other depth forwards or just even forwards that have gone for 1st round picks, even in Leafs trade deadline history, I suppose for that, yes, like it's a high asking price, but I just like when I look at what, I don't know, some of these other centers went for, and it kind of felt like Scott Laughton was at like happy middle. You had like either guys that were like way worse than him or way better than him, like it almost felt like he was the only dude in the middle there. So I guess like I'm just saying for maybe scarcity, I think it was the right move. 1st round pick, well, yeah, I mean that is a high asking price. I feel like on the last pod you guys were floating out that it'd be like a 2nd and a 4th or something like that. We lost a 1st, and then I mean Grabentkin is easily worth a 1st round pick, so basically 2 firsts. I don't know.
I think you hit the nail on the head, Steven, because it's like you look at some of the other deals that the Leafs could have made, because, like, Tim, surely even you would also agree, we needed something at 3C. Like, doing nothing was not an option here. If we did nothing instead of the deal Brad made, you would have just given that an F. So the fact that Brad had to do something here, we weren't going to get Nelson. Like, we're not matching that offer that the Colorado Avalanche made for Brock Nelson. Luke Schenn turns out wasn't even on the table, or Braden Schenn wasn't even on the table. Like, there's not another deal out there that you would have said, you know what, the Leafs should have made that would have got better value. Or if we did make a deal for one of these better centers or blow St. Louis out of the water with an offer, then we wouldn't be getting Carlo. We would have got no one on the back end, and you would have been, watching Riley go out there with, I don't know, Benoit or something for our top pair of the Stanley Cup playoffs. So we needed to do something, and we were just outbid from the top guys. We didn't get one of the bottom guys, and Scott Laughton is objectively going to make our forward group better. You're right. He's not the scoring bottom six player that we could have maybe targeted, but he's a heck of a lot more defensively responsible than Domi is, and I just can't imagine them even wanting to play Domi in these playoff tight games like that.
Ryan, as a Leafs fan, I think I reserve the right to be perpetually unhappy and complain all the time. It's what we do. It's why we have a podcast. But.
Well, I do wonder for him who he's playing with, and if it's really even truly the right fit. Like, what's the identity of this new third line?
Well, one quick thing just on Scott Laughton himself. I think the important thing to look at, and which makes me a bit happier with it, it's that even though he's going to be compared to Domi, who's currently the Leafs third line center, truly the upgrade is the fact that he's pushing Ryan Reeves out of the lineup. So Ryan Reeves was just a clear waiver stay, so he'll be in the minors, maybe bounce up and down. We'll see what happened with injuries, but the jump from Ryan Reeves, who's getting lineup time, up to Scott Laughton is significant, and I'd say that one, maybe, I don't know what a first round pick in 2027 is worth, but I like that kind of upgrade. But
I mean,
would you have traded our first round pick in 2027 just to get Ryan Reeves out of the lineup? Yes or no?
We like to joke about, I think it started with Mike Babcock, but sometimes you got to take the toys away from your coach.
Yeah.
If we added any player, it would have bumped a Ryan Reeves or a Dewar or whoever that 12th forward is. Like, everyone just gets bumped down. So like that was happening no matter who you brought in, really, unless if you brought in a 12th forward equivalent, which I don't think we were really planning on doing. It's to me, what bringing in just a centerpiece like this, a centerman, is it gives us a little bit more security. Like, we saw it with the time that Auston Matthews missed, and I think John Tavares missed some time as well, if I'm not wrong. And it's just like you lose one of those guys, and all of a sudden your team looks awful. Like, you have Pontus Holmberg as your second line center or something. Like, it's just not good. And it's just like, it means if maybe Laughton is not having it for a game, and I'm talking about the games that matter, like games in the playoffs here, then you can just move him to the wing and try Domi there or whatever. But like before this deal was done, you didn't have anyone really. Like it was Holmberg. Like, that was the next option. They're not moving Nylander to center. We know that. So it's just, like, they needed to make a deal for center, and I think Scott Laughton was probably the best that they could have done. And I love that we have him for 2 seasons. 2 seasons
That's
at $1.5 million, Tim, for our third line center. Like, that's phenomenal. You gotta love that.
It's great that next year we're not going to have to make a trade for a depth forward because we already have him. But it's also a good thing because we have no picks left to trade.
But that's the thing. Like, the trades, we shipped out 2 first-round picks and Minton this year. And Tim, you made the joke in our chat earlier that's like, oh, next year's deadline is going to be so boring. Next year's deadline, our acquisitions are Scott Laughton and Coyle. Carlo, sorry, we did not get Coyle. And Carlo, like, that's our acquisitions for next year too. Like, it's important that we got these guys with term so that we don't need to go out and try and address them next year. That's where I would value Laughton even higher than someone like Nelson, who could have just walked in the offseason, or any of these guys. Like, we have it's security.
What did Charlie Coyle end up going for today? Because actually, he would have been a more comparable, like, production-wise guy to Laughton.
It would. Well, no, Coyle, I would say, be better than Laughton. But so Colorado traded Middlestat and a second and a prospect.
Coyle is scum.
Middlestat's the guy they got in the Byram deal too. Man. Yeah. That's crazy. He had a rough season. Okay. Still, I do wonder though a lot about the fit and who he's playing with, because, like, even though I'm happy with the deals that they made, I like when I saw that Brendan Tanev got traded, I was like, man, that's a guy I really wanted to be in our top 6 or our top 9, because like right now, let's just assume that Bobby McMahon's playing on that second line wing spot with John Tavares and William Nylander. Then the options for wingers to play with Scott Laughton are Max Domi, Nicky Robb, Max Pacioretty, and Pontus Holmberg.
Right? I don't really know why you're assuming Bobby McMahon's going to take that second line spot. He hasn't played there in a long time. Like, they're putting Holmberg up there, and before it was Holmberg, it was Tim's man Pacioretty. Like,
but it won't be. Well, you can't count on Pacioretty being healthy. I have no idea what's going on. He just put an LTIR today, but like, I just don't think that Pontus Holmberg's going to be on that line come playoff time. Do you disagree with that? I mean,
I'm not necessarily saying I like Pontus Holmberg up there, but he's up there. And if I don't know, like, why would he be up there if that wasn't
okay? So if that's the case, right? Then you throw Bobby McMahon into that mix, right? Is any combination of like does Bobby McMahon and Nicky Robb as wingers there sound like a playoff awesome third line to you?
Well, I think it kind of comes down to like the identity. Like I do like the idea of like Nicky Robb with Scott Laughton and Bobby McMahon on that line. Like I think the same way that Domi playing in that spot, like they have like good chemistry and they've been excited. And I think Laughton is an upgrade from that perspective. So I wouldn't be surprised if we see that. Part of me says like it'll be interesting to see what Calle Jarnkrok looks like. Like I think. How many years have we seen flashes of Jarnkrok, Tavares, and Nylander together, and it never seems to be good enough, but they always seem to end up back together. Yeah. So,
I think what we don't know exactly is like what Laughton will actually look like with these guys, because we've seen David Kampf, not really this year, but in previous years, get auditions for that third line center, and he's played with some more offensively talented wingers, and he just kind of looks like a black hole out there. Like they'll kind of be making a play, then it gets to Kampf and the play dies, and that's just kind of what Kampf is. He's there to play defense, and that's just about it. And even though we're talking right now about how Scott Laughton's, he's not necessarily going to provide you a lot of depth scoring, that doesn't mean that he can't be on a line that generates, right? Like maybe you put him with someone like McMahon and someone with, or even Domi, right? Like maybe Domi just shifts over to the wing there. That doesn't mean that even though Scott Laughn's not the one putting the puck in the back of the net, that line as a whole can't generate offense. Or maybe it does mean that line as a whole doesn't generate offense, and we're just going to have 2 defensive bottom 6 pairs. I don't really know how you're going to do that with Domi and Robertson on those lines. So it's going to be interesting to see how exactly Laughton plays off of these other groups. And one thing I know about him is that he definitely plays a heavier, harder style of hockey. He's going to be in there crashing in the corners, boxing guys out in the net to try and get that net front position, which is the kind of goals that you score in the playoffs, right? Like that's the kind of stuff that we've never been good at, and then we get to the playoffs and we try and do it like that and we can't. That's the style of hockey we've been playing all year. That's a style that Berube likes to play. So you hope that he's going to kind of fall right into that and it's going to be a good fit in that perspective.
It'll be interesting for sure. Like there's like a new interest in watching all these Leaf games, and like every shift is like, oh, who's playing with who, and like because no shortage of options available to Berube. Almost too many options, and you'd like there to be some clear-cut answers that hopefully like become clear, right? Because we have what 20 games left, month and a half left of the season.
I wonder if you're going to see Domi up there on the second line with Tavares and Nylander again. Like he hasn't been up there in a long time out of basically necessity that we needed him to be our third line center. But it just, like, on paper, it just makes sense. He's the passer. Tavares is a shooter. Nylander does everything, but he's also very much a shooter. Like, it just seems to make sense. And then you can spread out some more wealth in your bottom 6 and keep Bobby McMahon down there. It doesn't make sense to me to have Domi with Laughton. Like, what are those passes going to? So it'll maybe I don't know. It'll be interesting to see. They only have 20 games to figure it out. Like, it's not long before playoffs start here.
Could be Matthew Nyes too, putting him on that third line, and you try somebody else on the wing with, not to say that Matthew Nyes doesn't deserve to be up there, but they've done that before. So yeah, endless combos, and it is crazy because all those guys we were talking about are in the mix for that spot. Like one of those people is going to be in the press box, right? Mm-hmm. Like so, I don't know.
The one last thought I have is, like, Tim, you were saying that he's a comparable to Domi in the sense that, like, neither of them are true centers, and it kind of like a hybrid, and is not necessarily exactly the perfect fit we need. They're similar in that way, but they're also complete opposites in that, like, Domi is very not good defensively, but he can provide you some offense, or at least he's supposed to. He hasn't been great at it this year, and Laughton's kind of the opposite in that way. So you wonder if maybe at the end of the game, if you're down a goal, it means Laughton's going to get the bench a little bit more, and Domi might get the extra shift. Whereas the flip of it is, if you're up by a goal, then now you have the luxury of saying, we're going to throw our third line out there and not be worried about Max Domi making a brutal mistake or bad pinch or something. And we're going to put Scott Laughton out there, and we know we're going to be able to lock this game down without absolutely destroying our top two lines and making them work out every single shift out there.
Hope so. I know Scott Laughton plays a lot of penalty kill for the Flyers as well, so hopefully he can give us a bit of a boost. As penalty kill, I don't know the exact rank we are this season, but not as high as we would like.
And you know what wins Stanley Cups, man? It's center depth.
Florida teams. Oh.
No, stop, Ryan. It's center depth. That was a good one. It's defensemen and it's goaltending. And for right now, we have that, right? Mm-hmm. We've got that, man, because on the back end, I mean, the biggest move of the day, I think, is, trading with our rival for Brad Carlo, my man with the C, big C, coming home. Just kidding, he's not Canadian, but he's still coming to Toronto. This one was a big asking price for a big man to fill a top 4 spot, likely alongside Morgan Rielly, but definitely could be Jake McCabe as well. But, like, here's a guy that we've got, for a handful of seasons now, slightly retained, like, a good contract for a younger guy, too. This guy's 28. Like I said, he's absolutely gigantic, 6'5" every night. And I don't know, I can't stop smiling about the talent that we have in our top 4, honestly. Like, this is a playoff-ready top 4.
Yeah, just to go through what this deal was, going out to bring in this defenseman was our first round pick in the 2026 draft, along with Fraser Minton, who is arguably our top prospect. Is either him or Cowan, it depends who you ask, but, like, they were right there. So that's, I feel like I can't even remember the last trade deadline where we traded away that much to bring in a player. I don't know, maybe Tim knows. You have a better memory for stuff like this than me. You're more scarred than me. But two very important pieces going out, and Carlo coming back at 15% retained, so he's at about $3.5 million for this season, the season after that, and the season after that. I do agree, Stephen. It's it makes me giddy thinking about this top 4 defense, and I do think that it's a little bit less of a conversation about how those pairs are going to shake up. I think that, at least to start, he's just going to go by Rielly and see if that works, because that's the biggest question that we've been asking. It feels like for the past 7 years, it's just like, who's going to play with Morgan Rielly, and he's going to get the next kick at the can for it. So I on paper, you think it should work great. He's a defensive, huge defenseman, and he should allow Morgan Rielly to just play more freely, but we'll see if that works. Very steep cost to bring him in, though. Holy cow.
This losing Minton really does hurt. I mean, you're saying, like, the last time we had an asking price this high. Like, we traded 2 firsts to get Ryan O'Reilly and Achari, I think, right? That was 2 firsts, right, Tim?
No, I don't think it was quite that high.
Was it a first and 2 fourths, maybe? Gosh,
no, that was Nick Foligno.
A first, second, and third, and a couple other prospects.
That's a ton. But anyway, just because he was... The Minton one hurts because he was so close, right, to being ready. Like, normally it's like we trade away some prospect who, Grebenkin, who's played a handful of games, or some guy who hasn't even come over to North America yet. Like, this guy's played something like 10, 15 games for the Leafs this season. And
you see the flashes.
Yeah, and he's a Ontario boy, and it's a shame to see him go, especially to a rival. I know my mom will be upset, and Haley was upset when I told her, but it had to happen. And because what we're getting back, like, this isn't a situation where we're getting a rental for one of our top prospects. Like, this is a
piece.
Yeah. So even though, like, the give really hurts, this needed to happen.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think what's also, like, good to note is that, especially with the retention, this is a guy that's going to play in our top 4 for the next 3 playoff runs, and he's being paid $3.5 million a year to do it. Like, it kind of shades of the Jake McCabe deal from, I guess it was a couple years ago now, where with the 50% retention, he was only getting paid $2 million. He's playing like a $5 million defenseman or more. And so now Brendan Carlo, what'll be tough is that he's had a few strong seasons. He was having a down year this year. Granted, all the Bruins were having a down year this year. So which Brendan Carlo shows up on the Leafs will be very interesting. It's like, how does he perform on a team with great goaltending? Bruins have been a little shaky this year, but the one thing that will not change is he is 6'5" every night.
Who is his D partner with the Bruins? Is he playing with McAvoy? Do you know?
He was playing with Lindholm for a while, but Lindholm's been injured for a lot, so he's been kind of bouncing around with a few different partners. So Morgan Rielly, Morgan Rielly's a funny one because you say like, oh, he's an upgrade over whoever else he's played with, but probably not an upgrade defensively.
Well, it's kind of interesting. Like we were, Tim, you and I in our last pod where we were setting up the trade deadline, we were kind of talking about what our priorities would be, and we both agreed that third line center is like number one priority. Then after that is help on the back end. And you were kind of saying like an 8-2 or a 7-3 split, and I was more like a 6-5. But like in hindsight, now that this deal is done, who the heck cares about your third line center? Like, fill out your top 4D. Like Steven said it, you're centered. Like, it's the defense. It wins championships. And I look at this top 4 of Rielly and Carlo and McCabe and Tanev. That is a top 4 that could win you a Stanley Cup, right? Like that's, and we even saw it at the beginning of the year. Like, remember when Rielly and Ekman-Larsson were looking great? We're like, this is the best top 4 we've ever had. And then it didn't quite last. Ekman-Larsson came down a little bit more, back down to earth. And we're like, ew, this doesn't look good. But now, this looks great.
Well, what I wonder as well, like, I haven't talked about the games, but Chris Tanev has been out for a while. Leafs have looked rough defensively without Chris Tanev. And so, I mean, Chris Tanev has been amazing this season, but if we're like one injury away from having a real rough defense, like that's not some, like, over the course of certainly a long playoff run. I mean, the Leafs wouldn't know, but rumor has it, long playoff runs, injuries happen, especially guys get banged up. And so I'm not disappointed that we did go like all in on, maybe not quite all in, 70-30 towards the top 4D.
Yeah.
I am worried that like we're gonna see a lot of 2-1 losses in the playoffs. Like it comes down though, like for the forwards, like this has been the last 8 off seasons in a row. If Auston Matthews plays like Auston Matthews in the playoffs, the Leafs will win.
But partially what's been different about this year to previous years, because Tim, you're referencing how we always have a hard time scoring goals in the playoffs and the offense dries up and the Stars can't push through. But like in all these other years throughout the regular season, we play a different style of hockey. We play the hockey that it let our big guys thrive and let Marner kind of dance around. And then playoffs would come around and we'd be choking out there and there's no room on the ice and we can't do anything. We're just kind of flipping it in, which we haven't done all season. That's not our game plan. And we can't find a way to punch through. And then we didn't have a strong goaltending. So it basically just comes down to which team makes a mistake first. That would be us, because we'd have Travis Dermott doing spinoramas on the blue line or whatever. And we'd lose the game. Yes, well, that's what was wrong. And now this year, it does not feel like we're better equipped to play a 2-1 style hockey game where the other team will start doing spinoramas on the blue line and we will take advantage. Like, it feels like that we flipped the script here. And I know that the concern is that in previous years we've had a hard time scoring goals. And that might be the case again this year where the offense is hard to come by. But I think we're significantly better prepared to handle that. And we're prepared to keep them at 2-1 where they're the 1 and we get to be the 2 this time.
Hope so.
Yeah, but it's kind of what I was saying at the beginning of the pod, though, with the forwards, is you can always just keep adding more and more of them, and I do, like, you always have room for that. I do kind of wish we would have added just one more insurance piece at winger or something like that, somebody who's scored a lot of goals this season. I don't know, just didn't happen. I mean, part of that's because we just didn't have the picks, and our prospects are weird, right? Like, we traded away one of our 3 legitimate prospects that anybody would want today. Well, and Grebenkin, sorry, too, I guess. Grebenkin rocks. But like, seriously, right, it's just Cowan, Danford, or Minton, and even none of them are, like, quite as highly touted as a lot of the other prospects that were getting thrown around today, and, like, the deal with the Islanders and for Rantanen and stuff like that. So that could have been part of it as well, right? But this is a good Leafs team. Like, I'm really excited. I think these were the moves that needed to be done, and I can't stop smiling about this top four. Like, this is insane. Just thinking of, like, when we would go to playoff games, watch Ron Hainsey on the right side. Like, we just locked down a 28-year-old, 6'5" right shot defenseman who's going to, and I already have his jersey. Like, we are, what is this world we're living in, boys?
C for Carlo. Well, we've talked about how great the Leafs are looking.
Should we round out the last trade that the Leafs made first before we move on there, Tim? Not that it's like a big one, but we shipped off Timmins and Dewar to Pittsburgh for just a late pick. I don't even know what the pick was. That was a late pick.
Fifth rounder.
For a 5th-round pick back. Really just a cap dump to make the Coyle money work. Do you guys have any thoughts about that? For me, it's just like they were expendable. They probably weren't going to be our playoff roster anyway. Don't really care.
The only thing that's, I say, notable to that is that the Leafs decided to keep Nick Robertson ahead of, I guess, I mean, Timmins was definitely short end of the stick, but ahead of Connor Dewar. And it's testament to Robertson. Like, he was looking like, is he going to have any Robertson, any value?
Is that really a testament? Like, Dewar was so nothing. He was worse than vanilla. He was just an empty bowl that wishes it had ice cream. Is what he was. He was a nothing. Like, if Dewar was ahead of Robertson in your books, then that is a slight against Robertson, I think.
I have no comments on the trade.
All right.
Move on.
All right. Well, so Leafs not the only team making moves this trade deadline. Florida adding Brad Marchand is like, I can't even imagine, like, the worst nightmare of, like, I do not want to face the Florida Panthers ever again, which
just
is
like
precisely the reason why they added.
Putting the actual trade aside and what it means for us, as they're like, we're probably going to face into the playoffs at some point. That is wild that the Boston Bruins traded their captain, like the face of their franchise, to a divisional rival who bounced them in the playoffs last year. Like, when was the last time you saw that? I don't even know. That is crazy that even happened at all.
No, I mean, like, I say kudos to the Bruins GM because he was able to, like, I think with the Leafs as well, like, able to demand a higher price and knowing that, okay, the fit's there, you want to, this is what you want, you have to pay for it. Brad Marchand had like a no trade limited list, so a little more handcuff there. Guess Brad Marchand wanted to go to Florida just to be reunited with Sam Bennett.
Oh,
what was the ask, by the way? I didn't see that because that trade came down so late.
It's a conditional 7-round second round pick that changes to a first if Florida wins 2 playoff rounds.
That's it to get Marchand, eh? Wow. Okay.
No retention, or I don't even know how that salary cap works, by the way. He makes like just shy of $7 million. Like, what are we even doing down there?
Florida like has $9.5 million to work with Kachuk on.
Yeah, but they've acquired like 15 players this week. Like, how is this math working out? It is crazy. So frustrating that we're still potentially going to have to deal with him. I hope that he sucks and they suck. And
well, to be fair, he's not the player he once was, right? Like, he's not going to be probably like the 6th best forward on Florida. Like, he's not we just watched him in the tournament where he donned the maple leaf embarrassingly, and he was like our worst forward that was out there. So it's not like necessarily he's going to come out and he's going to dominate the Leafs or Tampa or whoever that Florida plays in the playoffs in that first round, but he is such a rat, and they already have Kachuk and they already have Bennett. Like, that is probably the 3 worst players you want to play against in the entire National Hockey League, and we're probably going to have to play them. It's just infuriating that he's back in our lives again. He won't go away.
Yeah, I mean, you say that we probably have to play them. We'll have to probably play them eventually. So Tampa Bay also added some depth scoring. Bjorkstad and Yanni Gord from Seattle give them much needed depth, like basically perfect fits. So I think we're all within like 2 points in the standings at the moment. So it's going to be a dogfight to win the division. If you win the division, it means that you're facing like Ottawa or Columbus in the first round.
Yeah.
Second in the division means you're facing one of the top 5 teams in the league.
Well, it's everything. It's everything to win. I think that the Leafs have a good enough team. You know, we were just praising adding these in our top 4 and everything. We have a good enough team that we can beat Tampa Bay in a playoff series. And we have a good enough team that we could beat Florida in a playoff series. Man, I don't know if we could beat Tampa and Florida. You know what I mean? Like going through those back-to-back, that it feels. And then after that, it's going to be Washington. And after that, it's going to be Dallas. And you're going to face Rantanen in the finals. So I don't know. It just seems so imperative that these last 20 games is going to be so tight. The Leafs have felt like they've come in second or third in this division their whole lives, our whole lives. And they just need to prove that this is the year it's going to be different and win the division, man.
Well, so what's so important? So the Leafs play Florida 3 times in these 20 games.
What?
Yep, 3 times. Obviously, it's like not a cakewalk of a schedule, but those are 3 critical games for if you want to stay ahead of them.
Those are probably the 3 games, right? I mean, like, there's no way we don't. And I think we lost to them the last time we played them too, right? So like, you can't lose that season series. You have to win though. I mean, like, we have to, obviously you got to win a lot of these other games. And the Leafs are like, I think on an 8-1 and 1 heater or something like that. Like, we're doing fine, but
yeah, but so are they. So are Florida and Tampa.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, if we keep that up, they're keeping that up. Like, those are going to be the games. That's nuts.
Yeah.
How did we let this happen? How did
you know
we
what's
let them acquire?
You know what's going to happen? We're going to I think that we play Florida in like a week or so. Like, it's coming up that we have their first game against them. That's going to be like that first game between Canada and the US. There's going to be just like probably a fight right off the hop. There's going to be murder out there because these teams know. Like, after today, all 3 of those teams know that. Like, it's those 3, and it's going to be war when they're out there.
So,
I mark my words.
Leafs always go 7 games, right? So we play Florida in the playoffs here. It's going to go 7 games, right? You're telling me that it's March 7th right now. In the next, like, month and a half, we're going to play the Florida Panthers 10 times? Are you kidding me?
Jeez, only if Tampa wins the division are we playing Florida.
This is like
in the first round.
that COVID season when we played the Canadians like 18 times or something in the regular season. What is this, 1912? Get out of here. Okay. The Rantanen deal, we got to talk about that because the Leafs were involved in that in a big way. I mean, I guess if you trust the reporting out there, and there's a ton of it, the Leafs were very much in the discussions for Mikko Rantanen today. We've heard that it would have been Cowan, Fraser Minton, and 2 first-round picks just to bring Mikko Rantanen possibly to the Maple Leafs. That's also just assuming he would have signed a contract with the Leafs, which it doesn't sound like he wants to play in the NHL really at all. So I don't know if that would have happened. But then I also heard that they called and asked about Mitch Marner in a trade as well. Didn't hear that like the Leafs actually ever reached out to Mitch Marner about it, but they were definitely like, that was on the table as well. What would you guys have thought if that happened? Because that's essentially everything we traded away today to get 2 roster players you could have gotten for, you know, basically.
And Cowan. Like, geez, I like what we did today a lot better than anything that you just described. As good as Rantanen is, and like, holy cow, how crazy would have that been if we're going to the playoffs with Matthews, Marner, Nylander, Tavares, and Rantanen? Like, that's got to be one of the most stacked forward, just like top of the forward lineup that we've seen in a long time from any team. But man, that would be nothing in the bottom half of your roster. We'd still have Domi as our third line center,
and we would have no Carlo either, right? And we
would keep Grebenkin though.
We would maybe have no Tavares or Marner too after this season.
Well, that's the biggest thing. Like if we're re-signing Rantanen, then for sure Marner's walking. Like, you're not re-signing all those guys, so like you're trading out all that stuff to basically just say goodbye to Mitch Marner and have Rantanen instead. Which maybe that makes you a better team. Like, Rantanen's won a cup; he's a better playoff performer. But I don't know. I'm more happy with the things that we did than this hypothetical.
I don't know. Rantanen's a 100-point guy. Part of like, I do agree that being like our balanced approach, like we had how many years of when the salary cap was like super low that all of our eggs were in the forward basket. obviously didn't pan out, and so we've now shifted a bit to have like arguably too much money tied up on the back end. But I mean, Rantanen's a needle mover. You ask anyone, and like almost universally, Dallas is now the Cup favorites now that they have Rantanen on their team.
Whether the odds he gets there, like this guy I cannot believe how much he doesn't want to play in all of these cities. Does he even know where Dallas is? Like, does he sure he wants to sign there? Like, it was pretty insane, and there's no way he would have wanted to sign with the Leafs. But like,
hey, Bob McKenzie said that Rantanen was open to it, but who knows? If
he went to the Leafs, I mean, it's not necessarily this case for Dallas, but like if he went to the Leafs, that would have been a all in, chips are on the table, and like we're kind of screwed next year move, right? And then yes, we would go from having like the 28th best farm system to the 31st best farm system in the NHL, right? Because like you were giving up absolutely everything. So I don't know. I think after just the way that like I feel like he's been acting and there was some stink on him. I didn't want that deal to happen, but it's just insane that the Leafs were even that involved in it, and that we have like names to it. And I mean, I cannot get over how much of a loser Carolina is in this entire process. I mean, they flipped their like basically their best center or their second best center on their team and turned it into Logan Stankoven, who's a great young player, and picks. And these guys started out the season wanting to win the cup. Like,
it's got to be demoralizing for the guys in the room, right? Like for the players, just look up and just say like, what the heck are you doing? Like, I want to trade out of there. I'd say like, I don't want to stay here and rebuild? Like, what the heck are we doing here?
I don't know what it is. Guys don't want to sign there and play there long term if they can help it. I mean, like you read like The Athletic puts out those polls from the Players Association, and like Carolina ranks low on everything, and like ownership, and I don't know, something about Raleigh sucks. People don't want to be there. Ryan, you probably don't even know where North Carolina is, so why are you even in this conversation? But
there's a North Carolina?
Yeah, they just made it. They just split up.
I get it.
So it's just crazy that the Leafs were involved. That's oh man.
We'll see. It'll be I mean, we had originally intended this to be a quick emergency pod, but there's so much to talk about. Like the thing about Rantanen, so he did extend in Dallas, so 8 years, $12 million a year. I think it reported to be less than what Carolina was offering. Who knows if that's just a tax-free
stupid tax breaks.
But what does this mean for Mitch Marner? So like on one hand, Rantanen scores more goals than Mitch Marner, so like that should be the ceiling. On the other hand, Mitch Marner now doesn't even have to share the spotlight, and he is the free agent on July 1st. Mm-hmm. He could name his price.
I think anything short of the Leafs getting like bounced in 4 games or just embarrassing exit in the first round, I don't know. I'd be pretty shocked if Marner doesn't re-sign with the Maple Leafs at this point. Like, I just think it's going to happen. He's going to be a Leaf for life.
Well, and the decisions they made, like it was totally in the back of my mind when you saw the cap retention on Laughton and the cap retention and just the overall salary of Carlo. Like, this now means the Leafs could do that. They could give him a lot of money on July 1st if they want to. I'm still honestly mixed if it's even the move. I don't know. We will see. Because, like, even though Rantanen re-signed, I know, Tim, you love him and stuff. Like, he's not been the same player in this, like, weird stint that he had with Carolina, and we'll see if he even gets back to that. But Mitch Marner's 5th in the NHL in points right now. Like, it feels like it's a guy that we just can't lose. He's better than Auston Matthews a lot of nights these days, too.
I mean, it seems that way. You're judging Rantanen based on, 10 games of Carolina? Matthews has been blah for 40 games.
I'm also judging him off of the 10 games that he's been without, the second best player in the NHL and stuff like that as well. But it's also in the back of my mind that these could be the final 27 games of Mitch Marner's career in Toronto as well. We don't know what's going to happen there. But I think if he's reasonable and if John Tavares is reasonable and the Leafs want to, they could bring back both of those guys right now. And then you go into next season with Nylander, Matthews, your entire top 4, Matthew Nyes, everybody is still there.
Yeah.
So you better hope this team does well because they can keep it together.
I remember after last year's trade deadline, it it didn't really feel like this was the year. Like it was just little things we added, and it just kind of felt like we're still in this hole, we still have that hole. I don't know. With this team that we have assembled here right now, it feels like we have a really good team, and because we brought the pieces in for more than 1 year, it feels like I kind of want them to keep the band together, to bring back Marner Tavares. Like, it feels like this kind of group that we have signed for some term here, I don't know, it just feels like it could do some damage, and I guess they still have to re-sign Nyes as well. It just, I don't know, I like the vibe, and obviously we haven't seen these new players play a game for us yet. Maybe they'll stink. Maybe it's these Boston stink will be with Carlo here. I don't know. Lowercase c, we'll see. But I don't know. I'm excited for it. But where do you guys think the Leafs rank? Even just like we'll start with a division, then maybe we'll go to the league in terms of where you think we're sitting here. But between Toronto and Tampa and Florida, are we number 1, 2, 3? Like, what do you guys think?
Assuming Tkachuk is healthy for
Yeah,
game
I'm talking like playoffs, like prime playoff rosters.
Well, I mean, like a lot of numbers point to those other teams being better than the Leafs, just in terms of like goals per game and a lot of those like nerdy metrics. Well, goals per game, I guess, isn't like a nerdy metric. But it's just like it just seems like a lot of the other teams, like the things that the Leafs try to do better, the things the Leafs try to do well, they do better. But I really think that we have the best goaltending in any series that we're going to play in the East, assuming that Stolarz is on, which I think he will be. We've seen nothing less of that. So like I'm really confident. It's just when we've seen those other groups that you just mentioned, right, in the playoffs score so much better than the Leafs do, that is the thing that makes me the most nervous. I'm not nervous about our goaltending going into the playoffs against those guys, not the defense even a little bit. I'm so confident they're going to be so good. It's just, can we get out of these games scoring 3 goals? Because Stolarz is great, but we're not going to win if we only score 2 goals a game, I don't think. Not in the playoffs.
Yeah, I would say I think I would give the Leafs the edge over Tampa. Like, I think Tampa's been on a hot streak the past month or so as Vasilevsky kind of rounds into form. But Leafs, I think, have enough overall depth and then strength on defense that I would feel confident picking the Leafs in a series over Tampa. Florida, it's hard. Like, they're so good at every position and like so physical. And like, I mean, we're like not the same Leafs team from a couple years ago, right? Like, maybe we can hang with them, maybe we can't. But I'd be nervous facing Florida.
It's kind of tough because we haven't seen the Florida part. Like we've beaten the Lightning recently, right? And we've seen the Lightning have a lot of low points this season. Not very much of Florida having low points, but like, gosh, those 4 games, when we do our playoff preview, if it's anything to do with Florida, I mean, we are going to like have recent data to point to be like, yo, these things did not go well, in the last 3-4 weeks against Florida, and like what's changed that's or did go well, right? So
well, I think it'll be a testament even to the coaching, like we pointed out with Keefe in the past as well, right? It's like failing to make these adjustments over a 7-game series. Here's Berube's a chance. Can you learn from these 3 regular season games against Florida? How do you adapt in a playoff series?
Mm-hmm.
Time will tell.
I'm so pumped for tomorrow night. I have to assume both the guys are going to be in the lineup. Brandon Carlo, I've seen a photo of him at an airport. He is en route to Toronto.
All right. I like it.
Well, actually, no, he shouldn't go to Toronto because that's not where they are.
That's right.
He needs to get on a different
change the plane.
Redirect the plane. Go to Denver. That's where they will be on Saturday night. Well, I guess that's it, right? Anything else you guys want to say? Feeling good?
Feels good. It feels like it's going to be a good last 20 games.
Signing off the Leafscast for the best Maple Leafs team of the Auston Matthews era on paper. I'm saying it. And let's go win the cup, baby. Let's go.